Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jan Lewiński. Latest reports show Poland's energy mix tilting towards renewables, with solar and wind power overtaking coal as the primary source of energy for the first time in history. Is this a major step towards a greener future, or simply a reminder that Poland still needs to make major investments and adjustments for renewables to permanently reduce its carbon footprint? Joining us now is Paweł Szypulski, Program Director at Greenpeace Poland. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So let's begin by saying whether this change, whether this, what we have seen, basically renewables actually overtaking coal, was that intentional, or was it simply the result of a certain coincidence?
It's an intentional thing, and it's a part of the bigger process that is happening. Because what we have to say, to be more precise even, it's the first time that renewables took over coal for more than a month. It's a massive milestone in the Polish energy transition. It is also the moment when, for the first quarter of the year, for the first time ever, coal produced less than 50% of Polish energy mix. And this is like massive, massive moment in the energy transition in Poland, because we have to remember that only a few years back, almost 90% of electricity in our country was produced from coal. And this is all part of the big process that is happening in our country. This is both a very important milestone, but also a reminder that there is a long way to go for us.
And if there is a long way to go for us, what path should we take? That's the crucial question. If we want to phase out gradually coal-fired power plants and perhaps use coal in industry, but for purposes other than basically burning it for energy, we need to replace it with something. To what extent are renewables capable of taking over a greater part, even greater than the 44%, I believe, that was the statistics now, of our energy mix further down the line? Do we have the capability to do that at this stage?
Yes, of course. It would be possible to have a far greater share of renewables in our energy mix already at this stage if everything was happening not as a chaotic process created by different external pressures and small decisions made by smaller investors and utilities, but by a planned process steered by the government. Definitely, renewables could already at this stage be a permanent majority of the Polish mix. This didn't happen because for many, many years we were politically bound to stick with coal. Still, we're in this coal trap in Poland. We have a major problem of huge subsidies for coal industry, for example, totally inefficient in economic terms, totally inefficient in terms of providing us with energy security. But definitely the change is possible. We can grow more renewables. This can be domestic renewables. And we also have to remember, because now the question is not whether we are phasing out coal. This is for sure going to happen. This is for sure going to happen in the next decade.
So it's about when and how, right? And when it comes to the process being chaotic, as you said, what would need to be done in order to get it back on track in terms of legislation, for example? Is there anything that we need to do at this stage?
Absolutely. Energy mixes, the energy production in every country is a very complex political issue, actually. It's nowhere dependent fully on economy. It's nowhere fully only business sort of decisions. It's a lifeblood of every society, of every modern society. So on the level of political will, there are many massive things to do. And the most important piece of legislation we need right now is unblocking the onshore wind legislation. This is the biggest missing puzzle of the Polish energy transition. But of course, it's not enough. Also, super important element of our future are the massive investments in Polish energy grids. What we see right now is a very outdated, very old, very inefficient system that is not able to cope with the electricity coming from renewables produced already right now. So we need far more onshore wind, and we also need stable, renewed new modern grids that would be able to cooperate with this modern kind of energy systems that we are facing.
So updating the grid, this is not controversial, other than being expensive, yes, obviously. But onshore wind, that is actually causing some backlash from local communities. How do you think or what do you think should be done in order to maintain the balance between the interests of those local communities on the one hand, but also the greater interests of the country as a whole from the standpoint of energy generation?
Unfortunately, onshore wind is a hostage of political polarization in Poland. Because if it would be only about local communities that would have legitimate concerns, this is also something that should be mentioned. There can be legitimate concerns about any kind of energy infrastructure development. Then there is a lot of space to deal with those concerns. For example, provisions for these communities, possibility to use part of the energy produced by the wind, maybe a transfer of financial gains got from energy production. This is actually something that was recently proposed in the recent amendment to the ongoing amendments to Onshore Wind Legislation Act, that it would be actually financially beneficial to live next to a windmill. And this could be something that would solve some of those issues. Unfortunately, we are facing the problem that politicians, because of the polarization we are facing, they are weaponizing this issue. They are trying to push the conflicts far bigger than they actually are. And of course, good legislation is one thing, but also creating the atmosphere around the whole energy transition, that it's not something hostile, that is something that we actually need to keep our energy bills low, something that we need to keep our energy cheap and affordable, something that we need for our industry, actually. This is something that we are missing. We're missing responsible politicians who will take the responsibility for that and simply deliver.
So what about the criticism of wind farms located onshore? Which parts of those critical arguments are actually justified, would you say? We're not talking about finances now, but about the impact on the environment in the vicinity, for example, of inhabited areas.
So there are potentially legitimate concerns about the environmental impact of wind energy, and these impacts can be mitigated. This is very important to remember. One of the examples can be an impact on birds population, another one on bats populations. This is actually well researched. We know very well how to avoid these conflicts, how to minimize them. And also because of that, the legislation that is now proposed is taking into consideration the location of the wind farms and the areas that are specifically important for biodiversity in the country. Also, something that was raised a lot by the local communities is a distance between the windmill and the housing. And again, no one is proposing that the wind farms will be right next to the buildings. There will be a distance of 500 meters between the buildings and the windmills. So, this compromise was negotiated for a long time. It works, it can deliver, and it will be always a cost-benefit sort of analysis. And in these terms, the costs actually outperform the problems. The benefits outperform costs by far margin. This is the cheapest source of energy. This is something that both the society as such, our industry, our economy, and local communities can benefit from. Because we have to remember that we also have local communities that are already very happy about the wind farms they have around, because this can provide an impulse, economic impulse for the development of the whole community. There is money to invest in kindergartens. There is money to invest in healthcare infrastructure, in other kinds of infrastructure. So it's very much about creating the proper conditions for development of this kind of energy, to listen to local communities, to listen to the environmentalists also when there are concerns on biodiversity. But all these threats can be mitigated. As I said, there is absolutely no reason to weaponize this issue, because if we will be trapped in a place where we will no longer have coal. This is going to happen soon. As I said, it's the last decade of coal, and we will be fully dependent on imported gas. This gas will come from United States, will come from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, will come from Norway. there is a growing threat that once the war started by Russia in Ukraine will end, Europe will be tempted to get back to maybe Russian fossil fuels. They will be cheap. There are politicians in Europe who would like to see that. And this is something we don't want. We want to be economically and energetically independent in Europe. So renewables, and wind is a part of the solution, are the critical path forward.
So now that you've mentioned the geopolitical aspect here, that is a very compelling argument to actually ensure that especially fossil fuels from Russia are not making a comeback. But also there is another question. Can this independence from fossil fuels be achieved without resorting to nuclear power? Nuclear power continues to be controversial for some. Poland is now planning to build at least one nuclear power plant, the first that ever stood on the Polish soil. Would you say that this is the right direction, combining renewables with nuclear to completely phase out fossil fuels in the long run?
So let's establish the most important element. Phasing out fossil fuels is a key thing. It's absolutely the most important thing that we are facing right now, the biggest task we are facing currently, both for climate protection and for Polish and European energy security and sovereignty. This is absolutely key thing. If it's nuclear that will supplement it, that's another question. We should have a strong and reasonable debate about it. We also have to remember that Poland is quite specifically positioned in this particular debate. We don't have nuclear power right now in our country, so the power plant that we are facing and that we are planning to build in our country is going to be responsible for only a minute part of energy that is going to be produced in our country. So it's a part of debate. It's a decision, a political decision that has to be made. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be very slow in terms of development because it's going to take many, many years before we see this power plant go online. And then at the end, we're going to face only very small fraction of Polish energy mix coming from this particular source. And unfortunately, there's no realistic way to see it upscaled. Because when we see other investments in nuclear in Europe, they are very slow. Really,
what about small modular reactors, though? Just a quick question. What about small modular reactors, though?
It's a very beautiful promise out there in the industry, but unfortunately, promise that has never been fulfilled. There's a running joke among people who deal with energy everywhere, actually, that they are always going to be there in 10 years' time, no matter what the time is, if it was 10 years back, 20 years back, and so on. So we'll see. Once this technology is commercialized, when it's implemented, then it's a reasonable question whether and what role will it play. For now, we have cheap, affordable, scalable renewables that are there. We also have solutions to stabilize the grids full of renewables. This is also very important. We have to remember about energy storage. We have to remember about energy flexibility. All these things are there, and we are on the path. So things are not decided yet, but we can actually do more for the benefit of the whole Polish society.
Paweł Szypulski was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And I'm Jan You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us.